a year or two. That's promising. I am worried, though, that we're not attacking the root cause of obesity. And if we're not, if the root cause of obesity ends up being some kind of poisoning of the metabolic machinery in the brain or body, and I would argue that probably relates to mitochondrial health and mitochondrial function, I have every reason to believe that taking a medication that helps you lose weight may not be addressing that problem, and therefore may not be addressing all of the negative health consequences of what we call obesity. So obesity in and of itself, we know that excess fat can become inflammatory and can cause problems in and of itself. But I actually see obesity as a symptom. I see obesity as a symptom of metabolic derangement in the body or brain. And that is why people become obese. And that if we're really going to get anywhere, we need to identify what is causing that metabolic derangement. Using a symptomatic treatment like a GLP-1, medication, to the best of my knowledge, is not addressing that core problem, and we're just ignoring it. Maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe these will be the wonder drug that saved the human species, and everybody will be thin and healthy forever and ever. I'm not hopeful, because we've had so many promising drugs come along, fen-phen, dexedrine, other things. We've had so many promising drugs. And at the end of the day, when you try to muck with human metabolism using a single processed molecule, man-made, I can't think of even one example where it's been great for large numbers of people. I mean, certainly manufacturing insulin is life-saving for people with type 1 diabetes, so that would be an example. But giving massive doses of insulin to people with type 2 diabetes actually is a downward spiral. I would much rather see people with type 2 diabetes control their diabetes through diet and lifestyle. And that might be a ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet or exercise or good sleep or all of the other things, all of it. I'd much rather see that, because when people try to control their type 2 diabetes with a molecule, even though it's a natural molecule, insulin, we know that results in really poor health consequences, results in higher rates of cardiovascular disease, higher rates of mental disorders, higher rates of premature mortality. Do I think GLP-1, molecules are going to be different? No, I don't have any reason to think they are going to be. So that would be my 2 cents, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell. Meanwhile, I want to thank you for doing what is, without question, pioneering work. I mean, I'm not a clinician, but I've been around this space long enough to know that indeed there are no wonder drugs. Right? There are drugs that certainly can help alleviate symptoms in some individuals, but that lifestyle, and in the case of your work in particular in the discussion today, diet and the ketogenic diet in particular, it's clear can have incredible effects, miraculous effects in some individuals, and positive effects in others that might not be of the same magnitude, but nonetheless are extremely important. So I, on behalf of myself and the listeners, and certainly just on behalf of everybody out there, because everyone does need to be concerned about mental health issues, whether or not they have them in their family themselves or otherwise, because they impact everybody. Just really want to thank you for doing the work that you're doing, because it really is pioneering and it's brave. And I can see now, based on our discussion, why it would work. You've given us a lot of hints into the underlying mechanisms that suggest as to why it would work. And you've given us examples as to how it has worked in patients that you've worked with. And this field is expanding fast. I think this is an area of psychiatry and medicine in general, meaning behavioral nutritional interventions, that is expanding very fast. So thank you for being brave and for taking this on and doing it in such a structured way, and for communicating it here today and with the general public through your book and your online presence. We will certainly point people in the direction of those valuable resources. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew, for being brave and having me on your show. And
it's been a pleasure.
And for a great conversation.
Thank you for joining me for my discussion with Dr. Chris Palmer. I hope you found it to be as informative, actionable, and exciting in terms of the various treatments that we can now think about when considering treatments for psychiatric disorders. Once again, if you're interested in his work or his new book, Brain Energy, I encourage you to go to his website. That's chrispalmermd.com. You can also find the book Brain Energy by Chris Palmer on Amazon and other sites where books are sold. And we provide links to the book and to Dr. Palmer's website in the show note captions. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and on Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions or suggestions about topics and guests you'd like me to include on the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comments section on YouTube. I do read all the comments. In addition, please check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning of today's episode. That's the best way to support this podcast. During today's episode, we did not discuss supplements, but on many previous episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast, we do discuss supplements. Because while supplements aren't necessary for everybody, many people derive tremendous benefit from them for things like enhancing sleep and focus and hormone augmentation and so forth. The Huberman Lab podcast has partnered with Momentous Supplements because they are of the very highest quality and they ship internationally. In addition to that, they have single ingredient formulations that allow you to devise the supplement regimen that's most effective and most cost effective for you. If you'd like to see the supplements discussed on the Huberman Lab podcast, please go to livemomentous.com/Huberman. The Huberman Lab also has a zero-cost newsletter that you can access. It includes summaries of podcast episodes, as well as summaries of various protocols for mental health, physical health, and performance. You can sign up for the newsletter by going to hubermanlab.com, going to the menu, and look for the Neural Network newsletter sign up. You just provide your email, and I assure you we do not share your email with anybody. And again, it's completely zero cost. Again, go to hubermanlab.com and sign up for the Neural Network newsletter. And if you're not already following us on social media, we are Huberman Lab on Instagram, Huberman Lab on Twitter, and Huberman Lab on Facebook. And at all of those sites, I provide science and science-related tools for mental health, physical health, and performance, some of which overlap with information covered on the Huberman Lab podcast, but often which is distinct from information covered on the Huberman Lab podcast. So again, that's Huberman Lab on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Once again, thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Chris Palmer. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for your interest in science.